Niaje bro, uko fiti? Changu haribie siku. Unaona wewe ukiinama campus. Your fellas were making money. Na si pesa hivi 500 million to be exact. Lakini sasa shida ya pesa ya wizi yati huenjoy. Shida ya pesa ya wizi unaenjoyingi maximum 5 years unless you're a politician. Politicians peke yake ndio enjoy pesa ya wizi. University students who stole 449 million from Fuliza. A documentary by Dark Hours Docs. So, now acha tuone how they did it. Was it easy? Can we do it? Can it be done again? Acha tuone.
7 men suspected of being behind a 449.6 million shilling heist from a digital loan platform.
Fuliza loan theft syndicate
could not explain how they bought high-end
vehicles and motorcycles. Scammers. Like you steal and then you start showing off. You get, ukianza kushow off na tunaanza kutafuta alifanya aje akapata hiyo. That's the problem. Ukipata pesa feature for like 10 years. Usishow mtu ama for like 5 years unless ukufe. Okay, feature for like 5 years. Ama chukua visa hama, enda Zanzibar, enda Mauritius, enda Seychelles. Enjoy your life. Mali hakuna mtu anakujua, you know? Like it's like you steal from here and then you start overspending from here and then you show off kwa social media. Kila mtu like that's why they go. That's how they got Hush Puppy. Kama unajua Hush Puppy wa Nigeria. Yeah, let's see.
2020, as Kenya struggled under COVID-19 restrictions. In Bomet,
a
university
oh my god. Mbona mtu stengeneze video mwenyewe kwani unaona sauti yako ni mbaya. Anyway, let's see. Bomet County, the home of fraudsters. Chat1.
Student was quietly stepping into a life most people his age could only dream about. His name was Gideon Kipkurui Rono, a student at Egerton University. On July 20th, 2020, Gideon had just secured the biggest bag of his life. The next day, he walked into Nakuru Equipment Supplies, carrying 143,000 shillings in cash. There, he bought a Bajaj Boxer motorcycle. For most people, bikes
oh my god.
Like that meant work. Long days as a boda rider, chasing past
bikes lazima ukue boda. Unaweza nunua bike for your own travels. Like iko rahisi kwenda mahali na kurudi like haimanishi
passengers just to survive. But Gideon's bike wasn't for work. It was for the soft lifestyle. 2 months later, on September 2nd, he returned to the same shop and bought another motorcycle worth 90,000 shillings in cash. The seller was impressed. Business, it seemed, was booming for the young man. But what no one knew was that the money behind Gideon's sudden rise came from a carefully planned digital heist. And this time, the target wasn't a bank. It was Fuliza. Welcome to Dark Hour Docs.
Wow, thank you, Dark Hours.
Coming from Bomet County, Gideon had grown up watching the rise of the Mulat fraud networks.
Yes, habari yako. Niko mzima na shukuru pia unaongea na David. Majina naitwa David Mwangia. Pigia simu kutoka Safaricom SIM card registration customer care. Yes, natumai naongea na mwenye line kamili. Hii line customer ya 0728 ni yako.
They made
I know, pro, lakini lazima ujite Mwangi. Lazima ujite David Mwangi. Why Mwangi? Like why the Kikuyu tribe? Like ama wanaaminiwa anyway. Nilikuwa nasema lazima aseme naitwa David Mwangi. Mbona si David Oluoch? Ama David
They experienced constant police raids, arrests, and the never-ending need to stay hidden. Gideon wanted the money, but he didn't want the chaos that came with it. So he chose a different path, Instead of running scams day and night, Gideon started studying the system, and slowly he began building something much bigger. Like a treasure hunter, he began visiting places around Bomet town where lost identity cards were often collected or abandoned. These were in government offices, shops, and public
Dopia
services.
stage. Ukienda
One
stage
by
unaweza
one,
pata
he gathered them.
lost IDs. Nakusaidia pia wewe unaweza Fuliza.
Then, in May 2020, Gideon made his next move. He purchased a Safaricom MobiGo machine,
You
a device
you
used by
cannot
agents to
purchase a
register.
Safaricom MobiGo machine, one. You either have to be a Safaricom agent, obviously a Safaricom agent. Yes, you have to be a Safaricom agent. So I guess alitake a job as a Safaricom agent. Na shout juu kuna mvua.
New SIM cards. Using the identity cards he had collected, he
I'm gonna
began
buy-
registering
No,
new
Stan.
Safaricom lines, one after another. Each line he activated was connected to M-Pesa and enrolled into Fuliza. This is how the heist begun. At first, it was small. He worked with few SIM cards and made few overdrafts. And since the routine worked, Gideon repeated it again and again. By September 2020, the system had already started paying off, and the money he had extracted was enough to buy 2
200K.
motorcycles in cash. That was the moment Gideon realized something important. This wasn't just a side hustle anymore. It was a business model.
Recruiting accomplices.
Despite the success of this business model, there was a problem. To grow the operation, he needed more identity cards, and collecting them alone had proven to take too long. So Gideon decided it was time to bring others in. The first person he called was Isaac Kipkimoy, a third-year student at St. Paul's University. During that time, Isaac was stuck
God dang. You see, it's not just
in Europe
accomplices.
due to COVID-19
Not the
travel
branches. Like, end of quarters. Team chic.
restrictions. When Isaac heard the plan, he was stunned. It was simple, clean, and dangerously effective. Even though he couldn't travel yet, Isaac connected Gideon to someone who could help move things forward. So in came Nelson Kamau. Nelson was already known in underground circles as a SIM swap specialist, and more importantly, he knew someone with the connections Gideon needed.
Alikuwa what movie inaitwa Expendables. Alikuwa anaunganisha alikuwa anatengeneza the Expendables, Kuna the swap genius, kuna the branch ile mwenye anaanza afu kuna mwenye amekuwa akifanya. So
The third recruit was Peter Gitahi, a man who would change everything as he was an IT specialist living in Trans-Nzoia County. Besides, Peter had access to something extremely valuable, the National Registration Bureau database. Using that access, Peter was able to SIM cards using 13 Safaricom MobiGo machines. Once registered, the SIM card
walitoa happy 13 MobiGo machines. Lazima kulikuwa na mtu from the inside mwenye alikuwa anawapea. Hizo stuff haziuzwi. Obviously, you can't buy
cards
them.
were sold directly to Gideon. This meant that Gideon no longer had to spend time collecting lost IDs, and all he had to do now was activate the lines and drain Fuliza. The operational cost of the heist was able to drop by nearly 50%, serving Gideon's dream business model perfectly. When the money started flowing faster than ever, Gideon knew it was time to scale. So together with Nelson, they moved their operation to
Hiyo kipara inaonyesha huyo mtu amekuwa akistruggle. Amekuwa hajalala siku
Nakuru.
kadhaa.
There, they rented an apartment in Kiamunyi Estate, which would serve as their headquarters. Inside that apartment, the team expanded with more friends joining. More SIM cards were activated, and one by one, thousands of lines were registered into Fuliza overdrafts. By the end,
Lakini kitu kama hiyo hafai kuwa nyote pamoja. Nafahamu mwingine hapo Nakuru, kwanza nataka ni confirm naanza kurecord ama naongea. Yeah. kitu kama hii ambayo mko nyote like mko area moja. Inafaa mmoja ako Nakuru, mwingine ako Nairobi, mwingine ako Mombasa. That way headquarters ikikuwa raided, wale wanakuru wanajua vile watafanya operation.
Of 2020, the operation was generating so much money that the group faced a new challenge. They needed somewhere to put it.
To put the money, yeah.
At first, the gang moved the money via M-Pesa, but the numbers grew to
2020 kulikuwa na crypto. Was crypto that famous in 2020? That's the only way ya kuweka do.
Too large. So on February 5th, 2021, Gideon walked into Family Bank Nakuru branch, deposited 1,000 shillings and opened an account. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. The account stayed quiet, as this was meant to quell suspicion. Then, after 2 weeks on February 22nd, the flood began. Every day, the account started receiving around 90 deposits. Each came from different M-Pesa numbers with amounts ranging between 22,000 and 100,000 shillings. To prevent the bank from noticing the high volume of transactions into one account from multiple numbers, each senior member of the gang opened their own accounts. So, on March 23, 2021, Nelson and Edwin opened accounts at the same bank, which would receive money from the operation. They would later withdraw it and move the money elsewhere. By April, the team expanded again. Once travel restrictions eased, Isaac was able to finally join them. On May 5th, 2021, he opened his own family bank account, and within 3 weeks...
Mbona family bank? Mbona family bank?
The account exploded with activity. That single day, it received 244 deposits of amounts ranging from 1,000 to 87,000 shillings. The money was then broken into transfers of...
So wangeregister a company instead ya kufungua personal business, like instead ya kufungua personal accounts, wangeregister a company ama wangeregister a business. Ava open a fake business. Alafu wakwen
200,000 shillings and sent to different numbers before being withdrawn. This was a common...
Wangeregister a business name, wachukue license, you know, wakwe na kabiashara, kasmoki ama whatever. Wakwe, hakuna mtu ama afungue ka wine and spirit. Afa kuwa na inflate numbers za sales. Simple as that.
Aspect of their operations and...
Nafunguaje personal account? Ndo tumange staff hapo. Nakuita it's easy, flaggable, like ni red flag. Mngeniita jo. Mngeniita kama kuna mwingine hapo nje.
Some of their heists would record very high amounts. An account opened on July 7th, 2021 by Gideon at Cooperative Bank had received 1,424,260 shillings 3 weeks just after opening. This amount was deposited through Gideon's phone and 9 additional numbers and withdrawn by August 4th the same year. And this paid for Gideon's next upgrade, a Subaru Forester. The very next day, on August 5th, Gideon and Isaac drove the new car to Mombasa as they had another purchase planned. At Binder Corporation Ltd, Isaac was able to buy a Toyota Mark X for himself. The heist was beginning to bear fruits. Soon, the rest of the group followed. On January 24th, Nelson bought his own Subaru Forester from Muzif Motors, and Jones bought one from...
Mmoja akinunua Subaru, watu wananunua Subaru. Mmoja akifungua family bank account, unafungua family bank account. What's up, guys? Ama nile time ya Subaru boy,
from AutoZone Motors. Finally, on February 24th, just 1 month later, Edwin walked into Al Siddiq Motors and bought himself a Subaru Forester also. One after another, the gang upgraded their lives with luxury cars and cash purchases. Within a year, the young men from small towns had transformed themselves into millionaires. But far away, inside Fuliza's headquarters, something strange had started to appear in the data. Thousands of SIM cards were borrowing money through Fuliza, but many of them had something unusual in common. They were never used to make calls. Instead, the lines would borrow money, transfer it, and then were switched off. The fraud
By the way, tangu lini ama time Fuliza ilianza, ilikuwa si lazima ukuwe na pesa M-Pesa for a while, like uko na spend I guess amount yako, kwa sababu sasa ukibuy line leo huwezi Fuliza nayo leo, Fuliza limit itakuwa zero.
teams at Safaricom grew suspicious, and the matter was reported to the police. The hunt for the gang had begun, and investigators were now beginning to connect the dots. Little did Gideon and his team know that their days were numbered.
Ingekuwa mimi ningekuwa nimepotea kitambo. Oh my God.
For nearly 2 years, the operation ran quietly, and almost nothing tied back to the gang. But eventually, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Inside NCBA Bank, the institution behind the Fuliza loan facility, analysts began noticing something strange. Loan requests were skyrocketing, yet repayment had almost completely disappeared. When investigators dug deeper, the numbers were staggering. More than 123,000 SIM cards had taken Fuliza loans and then vanished.
Like these big companies, you might think they know what they are doing at times, lakini hawajui nini wanafanya. Juu mtapeanaje add-on product afu mkuwa mfuatilii totally, like hamwangalii line imekuwa active for how long after hapo, like walikuwa wanapeana tu for the course of giving loans.
No calls, no activity, just borrowed money and silence. That was when the bank knew this wasn't random fraud, it was a coordinated operation. The case was handed to fraud investigators who began tracing the digital trail, following the deposits, the SIM registrations, and the movement of money through multiple bank accounts. The trail led to Kiamuni Estate in Nakuru, the gang's headquarters. Soon after, detectives moved in.
From Fuliza loan theft syndicate, the Banking Fraud Investigations Unit confiscated 123,000 new SIM cards whose mobile numbers were used to take up loans in January 2022 before being switched off.
In Trans Nzoia, police arrested Peter, the IT specialist linked to the creation of fake identity cards. From there, the rest of the network began to unravel. One by one, the arrests followed. Isaac Kipkamoy, 24, Gideon Kipkurue Rono, 26, Nelson and Jones, and several others connected to the scheme. The young men who had once moved millions in silence were now being escorted to DCI headquarters, facing intense interrogation and eventually court. When the Assets Recovery Agency asked how they had built such sudden wealth, the answers were almost unbelievable. Several suspects calmly told investigators they were simply farmers, growing maize, potatoes, oranges, even passion fruit. But when asked for proof, there were no farm records.
That's what I was saying. Like, unafungua business, una-inflate sales. Unanunua shamba, unalima kweli, una-inflate produce. Like, it's as simple as that, guys. Like, hii kitu itaki akili kubwa. You don't open personal accounts wakati wewe ni fraudster. Juu utafuatilia, it's easy to know. Hata nashangaa mbona bank haziku before, like mtu ana spend 22-23 na it's a personal account, it's not a business account. What are we doing, guys? Banks,
no receipts and no tax returns. Nothing. And that was the moment investigators knew the millions had not grown in farms, they had grown from Fuliza. What began as a clever digital hustle had grown into one of the most sophisticated Fuliza fraud operations in Kenya. So the gang was finally caught mainly because of unusual transaction patterns and SIM card behavior.
Hey, come on, bro.
That triggered fraud alerts inside the system. Despite them being arrested, these young men had successfully stolen 449 million shillings through Fuliza loans and had gone undetected over 2 years. But like many high-flying schemes, it ended the same way for Gideon and his men, with flashing lights, handcuffs, and the long road to trial. This has been Dark Hour Docs, and thank you for watching.
Thanks Dark Hour Docs, and them subscribe up kama ni subscribe. Anyway, kama kuna mtu anajaribu kufanya hii shit, you know that lazima utashikwa at some point unless ukue very smart about it. Lakini even the smartest of the smartest wameshikwa at some point. Inafanga point like unakuanga careful, afu inafika point kule kaya ni kama stafutwi, afu una lack tu hivyo, afu unaenda. Anyway, thanks for watching. Subscribe, tunangana kufika 10 subscribers.